And joining me live is former Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, Frank Lowenstein. Frank, really appreciate your time this morning. First, if I can get your reaction to this historic moment out of the Middle East after 15 months of fighting, that Qatar's Prime Minister and also the Biden administration now confirming a ceasefire deal has been reached.
Yeah, well, I think it's really a tremendous achievement for President Biden. They've really worked tirelessly for close to a year to get this done. Also credit to President Trump. I think he stepped in at the last minute and put some pressure on the Israelis that Biden hadn't been able to put on in the past. And from the United States perspective, we used to have a tradition that politics ended at the shoreline and we all worked together on foreign policy issues. And it was good to see us get back to that, at least for this period of time.
We are seeing celebrations break out in parts of Tel Aviv and inside Gaza as well about this announcement. How confident are you that this can turn into a lasting ceasefire or maybe even a permanent end to the war?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really the question that's overhanging all of this right now. President Biden made it sound, and the Qataris in their news conference made it sound like this was really a three-phase deal, that all three phases were going to be implemented. I think we're actually a long way away from that. The main issues that would need to be resolved to end this war were really pushed off to negotiations during this upcoming phase one. And the Israelis have been pretty clear. Netanyahu has been clear, and his foreign minister, that they intend to resume the war as soon as these 42 days are over. So hopefully, progress can be made in delivering humanitarian assistance and providing some really much needed relief to the folks on the ground in Gaza. But we're a long way away from an end to the war here. It's not at all like what we saw in Lebanon, where the agreement was designed to end the war permanently. This is really a temporary ceasefire and hostage release, and with the hope that more can follow.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we heard from President Joe Biden just before. He said the first phase is 6 weeks, where negotiations through that first phase will take place for a more permanent end to the war. And if the negotiations take longer than that, it doesn't mean that fighting is going to start. The ceasefire will continue. Are you saying that it's more precarious than that?
Well, I'm saying that, yeah, you're exactly right. That was a little bit of a diplomatic fudge, because the main issue dividing the Israelis and Hamas for this entire period of time has been whether it's going to be a full end to the war or not. And they never reached a meeting of the minds on that. And the way the diplomats were able to fudge that disagreement was to say these negotiations will continue for sure. And the ceasefire will last as long as those negotiations are ongoing. I don't think that's necessarily the way the Israelis look at it right now. I think that their view of it is we're going to do 42 days. And after that, absent some major developments, they're going to resume the war. So I think a lot of work remains to be done. It's a great day for the hostages, of course, and for the people in Gaza, and should be celebrated. But at the same time, expectations should be tempered for where we go from here, because a lot of work remains to be done before this war is really over.
Yeah, and the other question is, Qatar's Prime Minister says that this ceasefire agreement will begin on Sunday, so January 19. Does the fighting last all the way up until Sunday, or does it cease now?
Yeah, if the past is any indicator, it'll continue up until the last minute. The Israelis were bombing in Lebanon right up until the ceasefire was finally agreed to. That's generally been the way these things have worked in the past. We had a negotiation in 2014, Secretary Kerry and I, that we got to the point where there was a ceasefire had been agreed to, but the Israelis were still firing right up until the end, and it caused some confusion. And at the end of the day, the ceasefire just fell apart completely. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully this will work. There's certainly a pathway to a permanent ceasefire that's been laid out by President Biden. But I'm candidly a little skeptical that the Israelis have any intention as of right now to follow through on phase two, and also a little skeptical that the Trump administration is going to kind of hold their feet to the fire on that.
Well, just on the Trump administration, I mean, Donald Trump has been claiming credit. How much did Donald Trump's threat of hell to pay if hostages aren't released by the time he's back in office have to do with this ceasefire deal?
I don't think saying hell to pay made much of a difference. Honestly, the folks in Gaza feel like they've been living in hell for the last 15 months anyway. I think their attitude about it was, this really can't get any worse. But I do think that Trump played a meaningful role when it came to the Israelis and putting Prime Minister Netanyahu in a position where the lesser of his two evils was to agree to this ceasefire rather than be beholden to the far right in Israel, which really strongly opposes the ceasefire. So I think Trump deserves credit for putting some political pressure on the Israelis that hadn't been there up until now. I think that's a fair way to look at it.
Frank Lowenstein, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.